On a distant moon at the edge of the galaxy, the war between humans and the alien warrior race called the Varethi had turned everything into ash. Smoke covered the sky, and the ground was filled with wounded soldiers. In the middle of the chaos, one human medic named Elias Ward stayed behind when others retreated. He could not leave the injured behind, even if they were his enemies. His heart would not allow it. He believed that a life was a life, no matter which world it came from. Elias moved through the ruins, his uniform torn and covered in dust. His medical scanner beeped faintly as he searched for any signs of life. He stopped when he heard a weak sound, almost like a growl mixed with a breath. Following the noise, he found a fallen Varethi warrior half buried under metal debris. Her silver armor was cracked and her long white hair was stained with blood. Her sharp eyes still held the fire of pride. Even wounded, she looked dangerous. She tried to lift her weapon, but her arm fell. "Stay back, human," she whispered in her deep voice, struggling to breathe. Elias slowly raised his hands. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "You're badly hurt. Let me help you." She glared at him, confused and angry. Her people had been told humans were ruthless. But this one looked at her with something she had never seen before: concern. The ground shook again. A part of the roof broke loose, falling toward her. Without thinking, Elias dove forward and shielded her body with his own. The heavy debris hit his shoulder and he groaned in pain. She stared at him, shocked. "Why would you do that?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Because you're still alive." For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she allowed him to treat her wounds. His hands moved fast but gentle, wrapping her arm, sealing the bleeding and stabilizing her breathing. She winced but didn't pull away. He noticed small differences in her biology. Her blood shimmered faintly under the light and her heartbeat had a strange rhythm. Yet she was not so different. He realized how fragile she looked when her guard was down. As hours passed, the night became silent. The battle had ended somewhere beyond the hills. Only the two of them remained inside the ruined shelter. Elias built a small fire from broken equipment to keep them warm. The flickering light made the metallic walls glow softly. The alien woman kept watching him, as if trying to understand what kind of creature would risk his life for her. "You are strange, human," she finally said. "You save an enemy who could have killed you." Elias smiled. "You're not my enemy right now. You're my patient." He didn't expect her to answer, but she looked at him for a long time before whispering her name. "Lyra Vareth," she said. Her voice carried strength even in weakness. Elias nodded. "Elias Ward." Their names hung in the air like a fragile bridge between two worlds. The cold grew stronger. Elias gave her his jacket. She tried to refuse, but he insisted. "Your body temperature is dropping," he said simply. She accepted it silently, her fingers brushing his hand for just a second. That small touch felt strange to both of them, warm, human, and real in a world that had forgotten such feelings. Outside, distant lights flickered, ships leaving the battlefield. Lyra looked toward them and said softly, "My people will come back for me when they find my signal." Elias turned off her beacon without a word. "They'll shoot anything that moves. Let's wait till dawn." She frowned but didn't argue. For the first time, she allowed a human to make the decision. The night was long. The wind howled outside the metal walls. Elias leaned against a piece of broken wall, tired but unable to sleep. Lyra watched the small flame, her mind full of confusion. The human had treated her wounds, shared his warmth, and saved her life. She thought of her people's code: never show weakness, never trust an outsider. Yet here she was, alive because of him. As dawn's first light slipped through the cracks, she pushed herself up. "I must go," she said, her strength slowly returning. Elias helped her stand. "You're still hurt," he said, concern in his tone. She looked at him with her silver eyes. A Varethi warrior never shows pain. Before she left, she reached for her neck and removed a pendant shaped like a small silver fang. She placed it in his hand. "This belongs to my clan," she said quietly. "It is not given to outsiders. Keep it, Elias Ward. You saved my life." He looked at the pendant, speechless. When he looked up again, she was already walking away into the mist, her steps steady, her figure fading in the gray light. He stood there for a long time, holding the pendant tightly. The battlefield around him was silent, but inside him something had changed. He had met someone the universe said he should hate, and instead he had saved her. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. But the pendant in his hand promised that their story was not over yet. Months passed since that night on the ruined moon. The war had ended, though peace felt like a fragile illusion. Human fleets withdrew, and the Verethi warriors returned to their home systems. The soldiers who survived went home to rebuild their lives, but Elias Ward stayed behind. He could not forget the woman with silver eyes who had vanished at dawn, leaving only a pendant and a memory that refused to fade. He was now stationed on a quiet border outpost called Haven 9, a lonely medical base built on cold soil under a pale sun. Most days were slow, routine health checks, minor wounds, and rare supply visits. Yet every night when the base lights dimmed, Elias would sit by the window of the infirmary and turn the pendant over in his hand. The small silver fang caught the light and reflected it like a promise. Sometimes he wondered if Lyra Vareth had survived the journey back to her people, or if her clan had punished her for consorting with a human. The galaxy's silence offered no answers. Rumors, however, began to travel between traders and soldiers. They spoke of a Verethi commander who had defied her own kind to save civilians during the final days of the war. Some said she had disappeared soon after. Each time Elias heard the story, a quiet ache stirred inside him. He never told anyone her name, but deep down he knew it was her. His friends at the outpost noticed his distance. "You still thinking about that alien battle?" One of them, a pilot named Jonas, asked one evening over rations. Elias gave a small smile. "Something like that," he said. Jonas laughed. "You're too soft for a soldier, Doc. That's why they keep you out here instead of sending you home." Elias didn't argue. In truth, the quiet suited him. It allowed him to remember without interruption. Haven 9 was meant to be safe, but strange things began to happen as the months rolled on. Elias noticed a pattern, unidentified signals flickering on the radar like whispers in the dark. The signals came and vanished quickly, as if someone was searching but didn't want to be found. The commanding officer dismissed them as ghost echoes from old battle satellites. Still, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was trying to reach him. One evening, while checking medical records, he received a transmission meant for another base. The message was scrambled, but one word cut through clearly: Vareth. His heart skipped a beat. He replayed it, but the message faded into static. No one else seemed to notice. He spent the rest of the night staring at the stars beyond the glass, wondering if it was coincidence or fate calling his name. Days turned into weeks. Elias resumed his duties, healing soldiers, treating explorers, and teaching young recruits how to handle alien injuries. He had learned much about Verethi biology from that one night, knowledge that now saved lives. Ironically, he became the expert in treating the very species that once fought humanity. Some of the soldiers joked about it, calling him the aliens' favorite doctor. He didn't mind. It was true in a way they would never understand. One morning, a courier drone arrived from Central Command. Inside was a sealed letter marked confidential. Elias opened it with a frown. It contained an order requesting his presence at the capital base for questioning about unauthorized field activities during wartime. His actions on the battlefield had apparently reached higher ranks. Healing an enemy was not something easily forgiven even after peace. He sighed, reading the letter again. They couldn't punish him for saving a life, not anymore, but they could make him explain it. He packed his things reluctantly, placing the silver pendant safely in his pocket. He didn't know if he'd ever be allowed to return to Haven 9. Before he could leave, a storm swept across the planet, grounding all flights. The winds howled outside, tearing across the barren plains. Elias decided to wait it out in the medical bay. He lit a small lamp and worked through the night, checking supplies. Around midnight, the radar technician ran in, pale and breathless. "Sir, there's something out there," he said. "A ship, small, damaged, coming straight toward us." Elias hurried to the monitor. The reading showed a single craft approaching fast. No transponder, no human code. "Could be a smuggler," the officer said. "Or worse." They readied the defense turrets, but the medic's heart began to race. The ship's signature was faintly familiar, buried under interference. His hands trembled as he zoomed in. The design, the shape, it was Verethi. He whispered under his breath, "It can't be." The craft descended roughly, smoke trailing behind it as it broke through. The atmosphere. The control team shouted over the comms, asking for clearance signals, but none came. Then through the static, a voice crackled faintly. Low, strained, but unmistakable. Human Elias Ward. Everyone froze. The voice faded before anyone could trace it. Elias didn't wait for orders. He grabbed his coat and ran toward the outer gates, ignoring the calls behind him. The cold wind hit his face as he reached the landing zone. Flames flickered where the small alien craft had crashed into the dust. He could see movement through the smoke. A tall figure stumbled from the wreck wrapped in a torn cloak. Even through the haze, he knew those silver eyes. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. Lyra Vareth was standing there, alive, her armor scorched and broken, holding something close against her chest. She saw him and stopped. The wind tugged at her hair as she whispered his name, her voice trembling. Elias, and I had nowhere else to go. He took a step forward, his heart pounding. Lyra, what happened? What are you? He stopped when she lowered the bundle in her arms. Wrapped in cloth, a small child stirred, opening its eyes. The eyes glowed faintly blue, almost human, but not quite. Lyra's lips quivered as she whispered, He looks like you. The world around Elias went silent. He could hear only the sound of his own heartbeat. The storm raged across the sky, lightning flashing behind her. He didn't know if it was joy, fear, or shock that filled his chest, but in that moment, he understood one thing. His life would never be the same again. The storm still roared across the gray sky, but Elias did not feel the cold anymore. His eyes stayed fixed on the woman standing before him, Lyra Vareth, alive, wounded, and holding a child that looked so impossibly familiar. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the wind filled the space between them, carrying memories of that one night long ago. Lyra's legs trembled as she took a step forward. Her cloak was torn, her face pale from exhaustion. Elias rushed to her side and caught her before she fell. You're hurt, he said, his voice trembling. She shook her head weakly. Not as much as before, but I couldn't fly any farther. They were chasing me. Her voice cracked as she looked at the bundle in her arms. Please, Elias, help him first. Elias looked down. The small child's skin shimmered faintly under the rain. Soft silver tones mixed with human warmth. The boy's tiny fingers clenched around the edge of the cloth. His breathing was shallow but steady. Elias could see traces of both their worlds in that little face, the curve of a human nose, the light of alien eyes. It didn't seem possible, but it was real. He lifted the child carefully and looked at her. Inside, he said firmly. Now. He carried them through the storm back toward Haven 9. The soldiers at the gate aimed their weapons in alarm. Is that a Verethi? One shouted. Elias didn't slow down. She's with me, he said sharply. Stand down! The guards hesitated but obeyed. Everyone had seen the medic's calm turn to command only a few times before. They knew when not to argue. Inside the infirmary, he placed the child on the examination table and started scanning his vitals. Lyra sank to her knees beside the table, clutching the edge as she watched. Elias worked quickly, his hands steady though his heart was racing. He's dehydrated and malnourished, he said quietly. But he's strong. He'll make it. Lyra closed her eyes in relief. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. They call him an abomination. My people wanted to take him from me. They said he should not exist. Her voice broke, and for the first time Elias saw fear in her. Not the fear of battle, but of losing what she loved most. He paused and met her gaze. He's not an abomination, he said softly. He's proof that we're not so different. Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining with tears that she didn't let fall. You don't understand, Elias. The Verethi Council sent soldiers to hunt us. I stole a ship and escaped, but they will come. She touched the side of her armor where a burn mark glowed faintly. They marked me as a traitor. Elias helped her sit on a cot and treated the burn. Then we'll keep you hidden, he said simply. She stared at him, stunned. You would risk your own people for me. He smiled faintly. Didn't I already do that once? Her lips trembled, remembering the night he shielded her from falling debris. You never learn, human, he chuckled softly. Maybe not. Hours passed as the storm outside began to fade. Elias checked on the child again, now sleeping peacefully under a warm blanket. Lyra watched quietly, her silver eyes softening whenever she looked at her son. Elias finally turned to her. What's his name? He asked. She hesitated before answering. His name is Aaron, she said. It means light after war in my language. Elias repeated the name slowly as if trying to memorize it. Aaron, he said. It suits him. When the base commander learned of the arrival, he stormed into the infirmary. Ward, what is this? He demanded. You brought a Verethi warrior into our camp? Do you realize what you've done? Elias stood between them. She's injured and there's a child who needs care, he said firmly. They're not enemies, the commander glared. You're risking everyone here. If the Verethi find out, they already know, Lyra interrupted. Her voice was calm but carried weight. They will come. But if you hand us over, it will not save you. It will start another war. Her words silenced the room. The commander frowned but said nothing more. He left, muttering something about contacting high command. When the door closed, Lyra looked at Elias. They'll come for me, and maybe for you too, she said quietly. I shouldn't have come. You would have been safe if I hadn't. Elias looked at the sleeping child. And if you hadn't come, he wouldn't be alive, he said. That's all that matters. She looked at him for a long time, her face softening. You haven't changed, she said quietly.
Still foolish.
Still kind. He smiled faintly. You haven't changed either, still proud and stubborn. Lyra gave a tired laugh, a sound he hadn't heard since that night on the battlefield. It filled the small room with warmth. For a moment it felt as if time had folded, bringing them back to that fragile connection they once shared. Later that night, when everyone else had gone to rest, Elias sat beside the cot where Lyra slept. Her armor lay beside her, repaired clumsily. The child's tiny hand rested against her arm. The soft glow of the lamp painted them both in golden light. Elias felt something shift in his chest, something like hope, fragile but alive. He didn't know what the future held. The humans might not forgive him. The Verethi might come for revenge, but as he watched the mother and child sleep, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, he would protect them, even if it cost him everything. Outside, the storm clouds cleared, revealing a quiet sky filled with distant stars. Somewhere among them, their two worlds still waited, divided by fear, yet unknowingly connected by one small child asleep in a human medic's arms. The next morning, the air around Haven 9 was heavy and tense. The soldiers whispered among themselves, watching the infirmary door as if something inside might explode. Everyone had seen the alien woman carried in through the storm, and rumors spread fast. Some said she was a spy. Others said she was the same commander who once led attacks against human forces. But none of them knew the truth, that she had come carrying a small child whose tiny heartbeat had already changed everything for Elias Ward. Elias stayed close to Lyra and her son, Aaron. He checked their vitals every few hours and made sure no one disturbed them. Lyra had regained some strength, but her eyes carried exhaustion. She sat near the child's bed, her hand resting protectively over him. Every now and then she would glance toward the window, as if expecting the sky to burn again with Verethi ships. Are you sure no one followed you? Elias asked quietly while repairing her armor with a field tool. Lyra nodded, though her voice was uncertain. I disabled the tracking beacon before entering human space. But the Verethi patrols are clever. They can find traces even through dust storms. She looked down at her hands. They call us the Broken Bloods. They believe my son's birth is an insult to the gods. Elias paused, staring at her. Then they don't deserve you. She blinked at his words, clearly unused to being defended so simply. You speak as if kindness is a weapon, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Sometimes it's the strongest one we have. Outside the base, the wind carried whispers of an approaching storm. Not of weather this time, but of war. A Verethi signal had been detected far beyond the horizon. The commander of Haven 9 called for a meeting and Elias was summoned. He didn't want to leave Lyra alone, but she told him to go. If they question you, tell them the truth, she said. But not everything. In the command room, tension filled the air. The commander stood before the holographic map, red lights blinking across the edge of the region. A Verethi ship has entered our sector, he said sharply. We don't know if it's a scout or a hunter. We need to prepare for possible contact. His eyes fell on Elias. And we need to discuss the alien you brought here. The council is asking questions. Elias took a deep breath. She's not a threat. She came here for help. She's wounded and has a child, half human, half Verethi. If you hand them over, both sides will use them as weapons. That's not peace. The commander slammed his hand on the table. You think you can decide that? You're a medic, not a diplomat. Maybe, Elias said calmly, but I'm still human enough to know right from wrong. The room fell silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, the commander said, "You have 2 days," he said. "After that, I have to report this to Central Command. If they find out I've been hiding an alien warrior here, it won't just be your career on the line, it'll be all of ours." Elias nodded and left the room, his mind racing. 2 days. That was all the time they had. When he returned to the infirmary, Lyra was awake and sitting by the window, holding her son close. She looked out at the pale horizon. "They'll come soon," she said without turning. "I can feel it." Elias told her about the commander's warning. She didn't seem surprised. "Then I will leave before they arrive," she said simply. "I won't let them harm your people because of me." He frowned. "You can't even walk far. You'd never make it through the desert without supplies." Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes steady. "I've survived worse," he shook his head. "Not this time. You're not alone anymore." Their eyes met, and for a long moment neither spoke. The soft hum of medical equipment was the only sound in the room. Aaron stirred in his sleep, tiny hands reaching toward his mother. Elias smiled faintly. "He has your strength," he said. Lyra looked down at the child. "No," she whispered. "He has yours." That night the base lights dimmed and most of the soldiers went to rest. Elias stayed awake, running through every possible plan. He decided to hide Lyra and Aaron in an old section of the outpost tunnels, places long abandoned after the war. He gathered supplies, food, and oxygen filters. When Lyra saw what he was doing, she tried to stop him. "If they catch you helping me, they'll call you a traitor," she said. Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe. But then I'll just be following your example." She stared at him for a moment, then whispered, "You're a strange man, Elias Ward." He grinned softly. "You said that once before?" Before dawn, they slipped through the corridors, silent as ghosts. The tunnels beneath the outpost were cold and damp, but they were hidden from scanners. Elias set up a small shelter there and gave Lyra a communicator. "I'll check on you every few hours," he promised. When he turned to leave, Lyra stopped him. Her hand caught his wrist gently. "Elias," she said in a low voice, "if anything happens, protect him. He's the future of both our worlds." He looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once glared at him on a battlefield and now looked at him with trust. "I promise," he said quietly. As he walked back toward the surface, the first rays of sunlight broke across the horizon. The outpost was waking up, unaware that beneath its floors, 2 lives were hidden, one that carried the blood of 2 species and the hope of peace. Elias paused for a moment at the entrance, looking at the rising Sed. Each time her eyes would tighten with worry. "The patrols are increasing," he said one evening. "They're expecting contact from the Verethi soon. If they find you here, I don't know what they'll do." Lyra nodded slowly. "I should leave," she said. "If I run, they might follow me and leave this place alone." Elias shook his head immediately. "You won't survive alone, not with a child." She looked at him seriously. "You can't protect me forever, Elias." He smiled softly. "Maybe not, but I can try." Lyra's lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but instead she sighed. "You humans," she whispered, "always believing in impossible things." Elias looked at her, his voice low. "And yet here we are, 2 impossible people raising an impossible child." That night, after he returned to the surface, the radar alarms began to ring. A scout ship had been spotted approaching the planet's orbit. The entire outpost went on alert. The commander barked orders, soldiers rushed to man their posts, and Elias felt his heart pound as he looked at the blinking red lights on the screen. The ship carried Verethi markings. He knew then that Lyra's time had run out. Within hours, Central Command sent a message to Haven 9. They ordered the base to detain any alien presence immediately for diplomatic transfer. Elias's blood ran cold when he heard those words. He knew what transfer meant. It meant interrogation, dissection, or worse. He couldn't let that happen. Late that night, when everyone was busy preparing for possible contact, Elias slipped away again. He entered the tunnels quietly, carrying a small pack of supplies. Lyra was already awake when he arrived, as if she had sensed the danger. "They've found me, haven't they?" she said. He nodded. "They're sending orders to hand you over." She rose to her feet slowly, her hand resting protectively on Aaron's shoulder. "Then we must go. There's a transport bay on the East Ridge. If I can reach it, I can steal a small craft and escape beyond the human border." Elias frowned. That's suicide. You won't get far before they shoot you down. Lyra looked at him with calm determination. Then come with me, he blinked in surprise. What? You've already chosen my side once, she said. You've risked everything for us. You could help me keep him alive. For a long moment, Elias said nothing. He looked down at the small child sleeping beside her, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. That little boy had no idea the galaxy wanted him dead just for being born. Elias finally whispered, If I go with you, there's no going back. Lyra met his gaze. Then don't look back. Before they could decide anything more, a deep rumble shook the ground. The tunnel lights flickered. Alarms echoed faintly from the surface. Lyra's eyes widened. They're here, she said. The Verethi found us. Elias grabbed his gear. Stay behind me. They moved through the tunnels as distant explosions echoed overhead. When they reached the exit, smoke filled the air. The night sky burned with light. Verethi ships had landed on the plains and human forces were already responding. The battlefield glowed red and gold under the twin moons. Lyra held Aaron close, shielding him from the wind. We can't stay, she shouted over the noise. Elias led them toward the old transport bay. But before they could reach it, searchlights swept over the rocks. Human soldiers appeared, their weapons raised. Behind them, the commander's voice echoed. Elias Ward. Step away from the alien. Elias stopped, breathing hard. He looked at Lyra, then at the child in her arms. The soldiers spread out, forming a half-circle around them. You don't understand, Elias called out. She's not an enemy. She's just trying to save her son. The commander shouted back. That thing is not a child, it's a threat to peace. Hand them over now. Lyra's grip on Aaron tightened. She whispered something in her language, a promise meant only for her son. Elias's jaw tightened. If you want them, he said quietly, you'll have to go through me. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. The soldiers hesitated. Even they knew Elias wasn't a fighter, he was a healer. But the way he stood in front of the alien woman, defiant and steady, made them pause. Then a blinding flash streaked across the sky. A Verethi dropship descended, engines roaring. The commander turned to look just as the alien soldiers landed on the opposite ridge. Both sides raised their weapons. The air trembled with tension. Elias shouted, Stop this! You'll kill everyone! But no one listened. Then he heard Lyra whisper his name. He turned to her and she pressed something. Lyra's breathing was uneven, her steps faltering. She had been hurt again during the escape. A deep scorch mark burned across her shoulder. Elias pulled her behind cover and checked the wound. You're bleeding badly, he said, his hands shaking. She gave a weak smile. I've had worse. He tore a strip from his sleeve and pressed it against the burn. You need to rest, he said. You can't keep running like this. She looked toward the child, then at him. I don't have a choice. He met her eyes and saw the same fire that had kept her alive through war and exile. But behind that fire he also saw fear, not for herself but for her son. From the ridge above them a human voice shouted, Ward! Stand down! Elias looked up and saw the commander with several soldiers, their rifles aimed at him. You're helping the enemy! The commander yelled. Drop your weapon and surrender the alien. Elias raised his empty hands. Listen to me. He shouted back. This isn't what you think. The fighting has to stop. But before he could finish, a blast struck the ground nearby, throwing everyone off their feet. The sound was deafening. When the dust cleared, Elias saw that the shot hadn't come from human guns. It came from the Verethi side. Out of the smoke, armored figures appeared. Verethi warriors, tall and silent, their glowing visors cutting through the haze. Their leader stepped forward, voice cold and sharp. Commander Lyra Vereth, he said. By order of the council, you are to be taken alive. The hybrid must be destroyed. Lyra stood slowly, shielding Aaron behind her. You will not touch him, she said. Her voice was quiet but fierce. The alien leader tilted his head. You broke the code, Lyra. You defied your bloodline. You brought shame upon our kind. Elias moved to stand beside her. She saved lives, he said. And that child is innocent. The leader's gaze turned toward him. Human, you do not understand our law. Elias's voice grew firm. Then your law is wrong. The alien commander raised his weapon. Then you will die with her. Before he could fire, the human commander shouted from the ridge, Open fire! Gunfire erupted again. The night turned blinding with explosions. Elias pulled Lyra down behind the cargo wall, shielding both her and Aaron. We can't stay here, he said. Lyra looked around desperately. There's an old maintenance tunnel under the east ridge. It leads to the valley. Elias nodded and helped her up. Together they ran through the chaos, dodging falling debris and stray fire. He carried Aaron now, holding the child close as Lyra guided the way. The sound of war followed them, shouts, screams, and the heavy thud of engines above. They reached the entrance of the tunnel, a small hatch half buried under rubble. Elias forced it open and helped Lyra inside. The tunnel was dark, narrow, and cold, but it led away from the battle. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing off metal walls. At last, they reached an old service chamber deep underground. Elias set Aaron down gently and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "We're safe here for now," he said. Lyra slumped against the opposite wall, holding her arm. Her strength was fading. "They'll keep hunting," she whispered. "They won't stop until he's gone." Elias knelt in front of her. "Then we'll make them stop," he said. She looked at him weakly. "How?" "You can't fight both sides." He glanced at the pendant she had given him, the mark of her clan. "Maybe I don't have to fight. Maybe I just have to show them the truth." He stood and turned toward the communicator on the wall. It was still active, connecting to the outpost's frequency. He pressed the transmit button. "To all forces, human and Verethi, this is Dr. Elias Ward of Haven 9, he said firmly. "You're fighting over something you don't understand. The child you're trying to destroy is half of both of you. He is living proof that peace is possible. If you fire on this place, you're destroying your future." For a long moment, silence followed his message. Then voices filled the channel, confused, angry, uncertain. The fighting above began to slow. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes wide. "You just made yourself a target," she said softly. Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe, but if one person listens, it's worth it." Moments later, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. Lyra reached for her weapon, but Elias shook his head. "Wait," he whispered. The door opened, and both commanders appeared, human and Verethi standing side by side, weapons lowered. The human commander looked at Elias, his expression unreadable. "Your message reached both fleets," he said. "No one wants to be the one to shoot first now." The Verethi leader stepped forward slowly. His gaze fell on the child, then on Lyra. "You risked everything for this." "Why?" he asked. Lyra's voice was tired but steady. "Because he is my son, and because he deserves to live." For the first time, the alien's face softened. He lowered his weapon and looked at Elias. "You are a strange species, human. You fight, yet you heal. You destroy, yet you protect." Elias looked back at him. "That's what makes us human." The alien nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is what makes you strong." The tension in the room eased. The sound of war above had quieted. For the first time in years, there was stillness between the two sides. Lyra leaned back, exhausted, her eyes closing. "You did it," she whispered. Elias sat beside her, holding Aaron close. "No," he said quietly, if they were still alive. The door opened softly, and the human commander stepped inside. He looked tired, his uniform covered in dust. "Central Command has called for a ceasefire," he said quietly. The Verethi Council agreed to negotiate. "No one wants another war after what happened here." Elias nodded. "Good," he said, his voice low. The commander glanced toward the sleeping child. "They're calling him the symbol of peace," he said. "Some people want to protect him. Others want to study him. And some are afraid of him." Elias stood up slowly. "He's not a symbol," he said. "He's just a boy." The commander sighed. "Maybe, but history doesn't care what he is. It only cares what he represents." He paused before leaving. "You'll both be called to testify at the peace conference. Make sure you're ready." When he left, Lyra opened her eyes. "They will never leave us alone," she whispered. Elias smiled faintly. "Then we'll make sure he grows up strong enough to face whatever comes." She looked at him for a long moment. "You speak as if you're part of his world now." He shrugged lightly. "Maybe I am." Over the next few days, the base became a meeting place for both humans and Verethi envoys. Tents rose on the outskirts of the battlefield, filled with translators, officers, and diplomats. It felt strange to see both species walking side by side after years of hate. The first time a human medic treated a wounded Verethi soldier in front of everyone, no one stopped them. For Elias, that small act meant more than any treaty ever could. Lyra remained by his side through the peace talks. Her presence was both a threat and a promise, proof that an enemy could become an ally. When she entered the conference hall with Aaron in her arms, the crowd went silent. Every camera turned toward them. Some faces showed fear, others curiosity, but a few smiled. A representative from the Human Council stood and said, "We thought our worlds could never share the same sky. But here stands a child who carries both stars within him. If he can exist, perhaps so can peace." Lyra spoke then, her voice calm and clear. "My people taught me that strength comes from purity. I learned that strength comes from compassion. This child is not a weakness, he is a bridge." Elias watched her, feeling something deep stir within him. She looked taller than ever, her voice steady, her eyes bright with purpose. He realized then that she was not only fighting for survival anymore, she was fighting for a future. The council signed a temporary alliance that day. Both sides agreed to protect cross-species families and study peaceful coexistence. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. After the ceremony, Lyra stood outside the hall, holding Aaron while the wind played with her hair. Elias joined her quietly. "It's over," he said. She looked at the horizon where the twin suns were setting, painting the sky orange and gold. "No," she said softly. "It's just beginning." They walked through the empty field that had once been a battlefield. Burned grass and twisted metal lay scattered across the ground, but small green shoots had already started to push through the ash. Life was returning, slowly but surely. Aaron toddled a few steps ahead of them, his small boots crunching over the dirt. He stopped to pick up a broken piece of metal and looked back at his parents with bright, curious eyes. "What's this?" he asked in a tiny voice. Elias smiled. "That's a piece of an old war," he said. Lyra knelt beside the boy and took the shard from his hand. "We don't need it anymore," she said, tossing it aside gently. "We'll build new things instead." The child nodded as if he understood. He reached out and grabbed both. She smiled faintly. "Every day. It was the night I learned that an enemy can save your life and change it forever." Elias nodded. "And I learned that sometimes the greatest victories come from mercy." She turned toward him. "You taught me that, Elias Ward." He looked at her, eyes warm. "And you taught me what it means to be brave." For a while they stood in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, their two worlds circled the same sun, once separated by fear but now connected by hope, and by a small child asleep in the next room. Lyra whispered, "Do you think he'll be accepted by both worlds?" Elias smiled. "He doesn't need to be. He'll make his own world." The night wind carried their quiet laughter through the open window. Beyond the valley, the sky shimmered with new light, the light of two species learning, at last, how to share the same sky. And under that peaceful glow, a human medic, an alien warrior, and their child slept. Proof that even in a galaxy built on war, love could still find a way to win.